Hello and welcome to another video. This is part 2 of the video on NPC traits, and in this one we're going to look at some more complex traits that we can give to NPCs and how these work mechanically and how you can set these up for yourself. So rather than spending the entire video watching me type stuff into an NPC sheet, I've prepared one off camera. So we've got this super goblin here. So we've given it a non-ID name so that if it's not identified, then this is what the players will see. And in here we've given it 100 hit points. Now we always want this creature to have 100 hit points no matter what the setting. So we've also included that in the in this box here. Instead of having a dice string, we've actually put the 100 points in there. So even if we have set this to max or random or whatever, this creature will always have 100 hit points. So that's the way you would do that if a creature has a particular amount of hit points. There are one or two in the monster manual, for example, that always have the maximum amount of hit points. We have come down here and we have given it a couple more saving throws. We've upped a couple of its stats. We have given it some more. Instead of just stealth, we've also given it intimidation. We've added in some damage vulnerability here to radiant damage. We've also got resistances here, a damage resistance to slashing and piercing from non-magical weapons. And we've given it a damage immunity here to bludgeoning from weapon attacks that aren't silvered, and we've given it a condition immunity here of prone. Now, I'd highly recommend that you have a look at the wiki itself. There's lots of information in here about the different kinds of wording that you can have for all of these vulnerabilities, resistances and immunities, etc., and also many of the other things that I'll show you with this particular character. So I would have a look at the wiki for the exact wording that you need for all of these different traits and abilities that the NPC might have. If we scroll a bit further down, we've changed the challenge rating a bit, which hasn't had any effect on the proficiency bonus. We should probably upgrade the XP a bit as well. And in the traits, we've added a few traits which are fairly common amongst the NPCs. We've got regeneration here, and again, this wording is fairly precise. The super goblin regains 10 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point, and if the goblin takes radiant damage, this trait doesn't function at the start of the creature's next turn. So that exact wording, we can see that when we mouse over that, it tells us that it's going to regain 10 hit points, but this exact wording is necessary. Then we've got these two traits here, magic resistance and improved critical. Now the language here isn't really very important because Fantasy Grounds keys off magic resistance, the actual words magic resistance and improved critical. So it knows exactly what these mean. So it doesn't really matter what you type into the description here. Fantasy Grounds will know that magic resistance gets advantage on saving throws against magic, and improved critical means that they're going to critically hit on a 19 or 20. So you don't need to worry about what you put in here. In fact, you don't need to have anything here at all, as long as you have got these actual traits. The title of the traits will work. If we scroll down a bit more, the scimitar is the same, but we've added in here the short bow. We've added a bit more into the short bow here. After the creature hits, then the target must make a constitution saving throw. On a failure, it takes an amount of poison damage and has the poison condition for 2 rounds. On a successful saving throw, the target takes half damage and is not poisoned. So we keep this sort of wording in this kind of order, and Fantasy Grounds will be able to work all of this out. It'll work out the Constitution saving throw, it'll work out the damage, it'll work out the effect, and it'll give the effect, apply the effect for those number of rounds. And this line here where it says half damage, it knows that if the Constitution saving throw is passed, then half damage will be applied. So keep the wording in there. Again, refer to the wiki for more variations on this kind of trait. And then we've added some spells. Now the new method that Wizards of the Coast are using is that the spell casting has been moved from the traits where it usually was before, and it's now moved into actions. And any spells that are an attack roll, they actually put these separately into the actions. And the spell casting really is just spells which require saving throws. So essentially, you would just sort of make this firebolt here an action, and it's just the same kind of wording. We've got a ranged spell attack with the bonus to hit. We've got the amount of damage which the target takes if it gets a hit, and then we've got some bits here about things going on fire if they're not being worn or carried. So that basically replicates the wording of the firebolt spell in this case. And then we've got the spellcasting ability here, which is in as an action. And you can see the wording here is that the Super Goblin casts one of the following spells using intelligence as the spellcasting ability. And then in brackets, we need to tell Fantasy Grounds what the spell save DC is for the intelligence ability. So we actually up the intelligence here a little bit. So that makes their spell save DC to be 13. And then we need to list the spells. We've got the at will, and then we've got a colon here, and at will are the cantrips. So we've got a couple of cantrips here. We must spell out the spell exactly the same name, all lowercase here, separated by a comma. And then in this one here, they can cast these two spells twice a day each, Burning Hands and Magic Missile. Now you'll notice that there are no spells if we expand this. The spells aren't actually detailed in the down here anymore. They're just simply added in here. You can, if you want to see the spells in your NPC, if you right click over the sheet here, and you can click this parse NPC spells, and this will parse the spells and put them down here. You don't need to do that anymore because the spells will appear on the combat tracker, because once this we drop this onto the combat tracker, Fantasy Grounds will read this section and it will populate the combat tracker with the appropriate spells. So let's see all of that in action. Let's get our combat tracker up, and we'll put our Super Goblin onto the combat tracker. Now you can see right away that the not identified, it's red, and so the player characters are seeing Big Goblin as the creature name. Underneath that, we've got some effects, the regen 10, and it shows radiant afterwards, which shows that if the creature takes radiant damage, then the regen doesn't work. It's also got the magic resistance effect and a crit 19 effect is showing on the combat tracker. The players obviously won't see this. This is a DM view, so only the DM is seeing this. If we open up the defense section here, then we can see all the vulnerabilities and resistances and immunities for the conditions and damage, etc. That's all shown in this little separate window here now, rather than being created as effects. So we don't need this sheet anymore, really. Let's open up Bob, the fighter, and Bob, the cleric, and we'll demonstrate a few things with these characters. So Bob's turn. He can now attack the creature. Will not bother with any attack rolls. But we let's do some damage with the longbow here. We've got piercing damage, so we're just going to drag in some damage into the big goblin. And we can see down in the chat box that the goblin has partially resisted the damage because it's piercing, and we know that the creature has got resistance to piercing damage from non-magical weapons. So where our longbow here isn't magical, so the creature resisted some of the damage. But if Bob were to attack with this magic dagger, for example, then all of the damage would get through because the magic has overcome the resistance to that particular damage type. If we go to Bob the Cleric now, and supposing Bob attacked the creature with his Warhammer and did some damage, and we can see that the creature took no damage at all because it has immunity to bludgeoning damage, which it doesn't come from a silvered weapon. So that's telling us that all in chat. But if Bob's canny here and hits the creature with his silvered quarterstaff, then when we do damage with that, silver overcomes the immunity and the creature takes the full amount of damage from the attack. If we advance the combat tracker now to the big goblin's turn, we'll see that when it becomes a big goblin's turn, it's healed 10 points of damage from the regeneration ability that we gave it. So now the creature can now make an attack. Let's quickly switch on the manual dice entry here just for a brief moment. And supposing it attacks with the scimitar here, attacks Bob the fighter, and we're just going to tell it that it rolled a 19 on the dice roll, and you can see that that has come up as a critical hit because we gave this thing the ability to hit critically on a 19 or a 20. So we'll just switch off the manual dice entry. We don't need that anymore. For Super Goblin was to use its short bow here and do some damage to Bob. It's done the damage to Bob. Of course, it critically hit, so it's going to get the critical damage for that. And then Bob's going to make the saving throw, so we can just drag that on. Bob will make his saving throw. He's succeeded and he gets the poison damage. And you can see that he only took half the damage because he succeeded on his saving throw. So we have got all that right, and we can also now drag in. Oh, he didn't get poisoned because he passed the saving throw. But if he had, then we could put this poison condition onto Bob, and as you can see, it's going to be lasting for 2 turns. So if we hit back to Bob the Cleric now, and Bob might decide to cast Sacred Flame against the big goblin. So he's just going to do some damage to the goblin. It's the goblin's vulnerable to this kind of damage, to radiant damage, as you can see. So instead of taking 7 damage, it tells you here that it took 14. But it also tells you here that the regeneration has been disabled on the big goblin, and you might have noticed it also disappeared from this line here, showing that the goblin won't get the benefit of its regeneration when we swing around to its turn. So if we do that now and make it the goblin's turn, you see in this instance it didn't get the 10 points regenerated. If we whack on to the next thing, then it did get the 10 points this time because that the suppression of the regeneration ran out because it only lasts for a turn. We can see, by the way, the all of the spells came through onto the combat tracker for our super goblin. We've got the firebolt here, which came in as a normal action, and we've got all these other spells here, and we just mouse over these, we can see that all of that works. So if we wanted to make a Burning Hands attack against Bob here, he succeeded on his saving throw. We can do a bit of damage, which I think will probably kill Bob. But if it hadn't killed Bob, then he would have only, well, he actually did only take half damage there because he did succeed on his saving throw, but because of the amount of damage, poor Bob has keeled over. So if we swap down to, oh, that's Bob making his automatic death saving throw, and he's had a critical success there. Well done, Bob. If we come back to the cleric now, and supposing the cleric decided to cast guiding or command at the big goblin. So he's just going to make that the goblin rolls with advantage because of his magic resistance trait. So he's actually rolled with advantage and he's succeeded on his saving throw. But if he hadn't, maybe Bob would then try and put the prone condition onto the big goblin. But because the big goblin is immune to the prone condition, it didn't apply it. We can see that the prone condition didn't apply to the big goblin here because we made the big goblin immune to that prone condition, which we can see here. Okay, as I say, once again, I would refer to the wiki page. There are more things on the wiki page. It'll tell you there exactly what the wording is and how you would go about giving your NPCs the traits that you want so that the maximum amount of automation can appear on the combat tracker during combat. Okay, thanks for watching this one. We'll do one more, I think, on creating encounters just to finish off the 5e wiki page on NPCs and encounters. So we'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.